Brr, this tea is cold. Okay, that's the only Everest reference I could get. Buckle down. So I just came back from watching Everest, and needless to say, it's a film that I've been looking forward to for quite some time because the whole story of the '95 disaster that happened on Everest is one of the most interesting stories of nonfiction I've ever read. That whole story is something that I couldn't imagine what those people went through. I've been waiting for this film for a long time because I've always wanted to see what the storm looked like. Because in the book, it described it as this big black cloud, but in the film, that actually gave a character in an ominous presence and just gave a little bit more of a visual to what I had tried to imagine in the book. Because obviously you can only interpret so many things right, or in your own interpretation from a novel. So to see it on the screen was great, considering the only other version we have is a TV movie that came out back in the 90s. So now we have this theatrical release. Needless to say, the first thing I want to talk about is the Imax camera. The Imax camera was great, and the 3D was pretty good too. Because the opening shots, the cinematography of the mountain, even the shots that obviously had to be done in a studio looked like they were done on the mountain. It's basically like watching Perfect Storm but on a mountain. You know how that movie really greatly emulated a boat in a giant storm, even though they did it all in a studio in a giant wave pool? Same thing for Everest here. How they were able to mimic half the stuff was pretty darn good. A lot of great wind machine work, a lot of good special FX work, because a lot, in my opinion, was not done with VFX in terms of how the characters looked and just their situations. Obviously, we have like green screen layouts of where the screen would go off, but the actual physical set that they're on, the ground they're touching, the snow that's on them, that all looked real. It was intense. But the problem about this movie is there's far too many characters. That's the greatest issue this film has. Now I'm going to make a reference to Black Hawk Down. Black Hawk Down, in my opinion, is a great film that has no central character. Sure, Josh Arnett is kind of the forefront. He's the one that the story keeps on revolving around. And the same thing for this film. Rob Hall, the story keeps revolving around him. But he is not the super main character in the sense that he's given the wide berth. There is a lot of other characters in this film. But the only problem is there are so many characters in this film, and the camera keeps cutting back and forth between these characters, and we have to start distinguishing who is who by the color of their jackets, or the look of their beard, or their mustache, to the point where they're actually helping us by every time there's a conversation, especially during the storm. For some reason, even though they wouldn't do it, they just keep taking off their mask to talk to each other. That kind of pulled me out of the realism, even though I know they had to do that to reestablish that character again, but it kind of took me out a bit. But the one thing I will say is that this film tries, despite the fact that it has a significant issue of having too many characters, it does try to make you care. I make a comment about how the cinematography is really good in this film. For the establishing shots, for all the scenery and all the shots of the mountain, very good. Even though they use the same opening shot of the mountain twice. Once for the intro, for the credit, and then again about near halfway through the film. But the one thing that was very strange was the camera was like this close to people all the time during conversations. It got really awkward. Especially when you see Keira Knightley's snot coming out of her nose and dripping kind of over her teeth. That's how close the camera was when she was trying to be sad in this scene. She obviously maybe had a cold, but you seeing all the liquids just drop down her face into her mouth. Not saying that that's bad, because that just shows how great the IMAX camera is and the IMAX experience is, but wow, that we didn't need to be that close all the time. That kind of takes you out of the film. So the problem I say about this film is that there's too many characters. The problem is there isn't enough, or there isn't enough time to look at the other characters. There are so many other people that were up on that mountain that suffered through their own events, and there were far more people who died than this film depicts. And one of the worst losses from this entire film is Scott Fisher, who was played by Jake Gyllenhaal. Scott Fisher is one of the most interesting mountaineers I've ever read about, and the fact that the man was able to get down from Camp 2 to base camp, then back up to the summit in record time. The amazing statement about the man's ability to climb and the crazy attitude the dude had. And I wish they had had more time with him. We got so much about Rob, which, not granted, Rob is played fantastic. The guy from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, his honesty and his well-being for other people was his downfall when he takes his buddy Doug up. But then all of a sudden he goes from Superman to having no issue at all climbing the mountain to the transition between Rob being super awesome good time to near death. It just jumps too fast. I did enjoy this movie. I'm pointing out a lot of things that were wrong, and there are a lot of issues that this film had. There's no other way they could have done this movie. I honestly don't think they could have done a better job because the story is just too masked. The only way they could have done it is if they had made it 3 hours long. But they tried. You can tell they tried, from the production to the FX to the whole stage scenario to the acting. You could tell that these guys really were trying to bring these people to life on the screen. The dialogue is so good at times. It literally feels like you're watching a documentary, because just how realistic the dialogue is, how their interactions with each other are just so fluid. It feels like real people. Not saying that, obviously, there's just a difference you can tell, right, when you're watching a movie and you're watching a documentary. I swore it felt like I was watching a documentary at times because the dialogue just felt so real from these people. There are a little bit of added drama elements, but the thing that I can definitely be happy about is they don't do it too much. They only do it in certain scenes, and it happens very sparingly, which is very good because I was worried that they'd over-drama it. So in the end, what is my thoughts on Everest? I think it's a great film technically. I think they did a great job setting it up. It's basically the perfect storm and Black Hawk Down of mountain climbing movie disasters, and they don't over-dramatize it. The problem is there's too many characters, and there's too little time given to those characters to really sort of establish a loss for any of them. A lot of people in the theater were like, wait, who's that? Who's that? And that's the thing I had an issue with when I was reading the book, too. I had to keep going back and forth between who was who. The acting is great, but as I said, just in comparison, I've read the book. Had I not read the book, I probably would have appreciated this movie a lot more, and then made me want to read the book. The book has just had such an impact on my life that I kind of felt undertone with the film. So in the end, my rating for Everest is a 4 out of 7. It's a good time. I think you guys will enjoy it, but just from my own perspective, I don't think I would buy this movie. I have the book, right? So I could just read the book again. But for people who really enjoy these types of movies, they'll be happy to see an actual true story done with little drama added to it. And I appreciate that again. But as I said, there's just a few issues that I have to deal with just because I read the book and just because I have already this set mind. So I'm my own worst critic on this because I'm giving sort of a biased review. Well, I am giving a biased opinion of it, but still, it's a good movie. Anyway, guys, that's all for me. Black Mask coming up next, hopefully, and that's it. See you guys later. Buckle down.